We're going to go next to Andrea Rodgers, who is a clinical psychologist also, and and has several roles. She describes herself as a wife, and a mom, a servant, a life coach, and a publisher, and has some very interesting books, Silencing Your Inner Critic and Releasing the Burden of Shame, which I think are I'm actually excited to know that. I may have to have a look at those things because I think that it can do a lot for healing in our community to pay attention to those two things in particular. So she's going to talk to us today about coping with stress as well. So without further ado, why don't we bring up Andrea Rodgers?
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much, Dr. Blessman. During his first 5 minutes of speaking, I was like, clearly he can talk about this subject, and us having that mindful moment really set the foundation for this talk. And it was just refreshing to hear that from a medical doctor as well. So I got really excited. So thank you to Dr. Blessman. I also want to thank Rochelle Chapman from Cures and the co-facilitator, Dr. Trina Costa, who did an awesome job. I may echo some of the things that Dr. Trina Costa had spoke about, but we're just going to really talk about stress. We're going to normalize it. We're going to talk about it. First, everyone has stress, no matter who you are. It is not a thing that discriminates against people. Now, we all have different levels of stress, but everyone has it. I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, we were talking about the first wave and the second wave, but we were really also expecting mental health concerns to really reach an all-time high, and we were like kind of waiting, like, when is it going to happen? And we're watching, and what I'm seeing right now is just that increase, not just from the pandemic, as was also discussed. There's still everyday life, so it's not like the pandemic happened and life stopped. Systemic issues didn't stop. Even more so, those things came to the surface. So first, everyone has stress. Also, all stress isn't bad. That reaction when your heart beat fast and somebody try to cut you off on the road and you hurry up and move over, that's a stress reaction that actually has a positive effect because it can keep you from hurt, harm, and danger. The thing where stress becomes an issue is long-term stress can really harm your health, whether it's a physical issue, a mental issue, or an emotional issue. So we are accustomed to have stress reactions, but kind of this long-term stress where, you know, we're worried consistently, day after day, week after week. Our bodies are literally having a reaction to that stress. So it's not just your imagination where it seems like you have a little bit less patience with, your spouse or your coworkers. It's not a coincidence that you may have one of two reactions. You may be snacking more and eating a little bit more, or you may have a complete loss of appetite. You feel like you are extremely tired, and no matter how much sleep you get, you're like, wait a minute, I'm not getting enough rest. I consistently feel tired. And then there's others who aren't able to sleep at all. So with all of this information, where does that leave us? It leaves us knowing that stress is a natural reaction and it can be managed. The kind of foundation point to understand is that you don't have to do anything to get stressed, right? You could turn on the TV and be stressed. You could scroll through Facebook, you could be stressed. You can just take a phone call or a text message and you can have a stressful reaction. To manage stress, it takes a high level of intentionality. I'm just thinking about that mindful moment that we had this morning. We had to pause, we had to stop, we had to become aware of the present moment. And those are the intentional things. It doesn't mean it has to be this big, huge action. However, we do have to be intentional in managing our stress. So, what are some healthy and optimal ways? Before I talk about the optimal ways, one of the unique conditions of the pandemic is that a lot of things that we would normally do to cope with stress, we aren't necessarily able to do. So we get together with our loved ones, we go on vacation, we go on a trip, or we go out to the mall. Some of those things we are no longer able to do. So, what is it that we can do in this time and in this hour? One of the cheapest and best ways to manage stress is through connection. Connection is not necessarily face to face, but be intentional about maintaining those relationships that are healthy to you in this season and in this hour. Those relationships that kind of feed you, we use the terms feed your soul. Feeding your soul is so important because there's so many things that are grabbing our attention. There are so many things that we are pulled in directions. There are parents who are trying to figure out homeschooling. There are adult children who have become caregivers to their parents and trying to manage that as well as working remote. So our minds are being pulled in so many different directions. We really have to be intentional about a word called rest. Rest is very important, and rest just isn't sleep. Our minds are going so fast. I don't know if you're like me, when you wake up, you're already thinking about your list that you have to do. I have to make sure I take a pause before I jump into my workday, that I take a pause, I take a breath, and make sure that I am focused and ready for whatever's going to come that day. Not just rest from a physical standpoint, but because our brains are moving so much, we know this, but taking a literal rest from social media, taking a rest from the news, disconnecting the TV and all of the social media sites, we really have to be intentional about disconnecting, because that gives us the feeling of connection on social media, but it's a false connection. What we're really craving is we're craving that connection to people. So whereas we used to text, this is the time to really pick up the phone and call someone and check on them. And that's that connection to someone else. But it's also equally important that you have a connection to yourself. You're giving, you're pouring out, you're doing so much, you're working, you're figuring this out. We need some time where it's not isolated time by ourselves, but actually where we're focusing on ourselves. So when Dr. Trina Costa talked about the journaling, when Dr. Blessman talked about the mindful moments, taking some time, what is it that you enjoy to do for you? Reading is a great stress reliever because it actually allows our brains to take a rest and we focus on something totally different. In addition to the reading, one thing that is very, very important is physical health. And stress reduction is very related to our physical health. Eating healthy and well balanced meals. I don't know how many of you have new recipes for banana bread. Banana bread is like the hottest thing going during the pandemic. We've got all these new recipes and we're trying all of this new stuff. But try our best to eat healthy because we're feeding ourselves. Having some form of physical exercise is very important. And yes, we're in the house. We can still go for walks. We can have that opportunity to do some videos, making time to unwind and making sure that you are one, connected to others, but also connecting to yourself. So, how do you know when your coping mechanisms or your stress is literally out of hand? Because in managing stress, you may not be able to do it just alone by yourself. We may need some assistance. We may need professional assistance if our high blood pressure is getting out of hand. We may need some mental health intervention. This is the time to not try to go it alone and do it alone. Stress can be managed, but it does not have to be managed alone by yourself. So that may mean reaching out to your local community health provider, talking to your primary care physician about how you are feeling. If you know that you just haven't been feeling yourself, there's so many people that aren't feeling themselves right now. Stress, while it is normal, it is not something that we have to remain in that state, because again, it affects your long-term health. So reaching out to get that assistance when needed. Trying to stay connected to the community, or if you're in a faith-based organization, that is going to be really important right now, to make sure that we are reducing self. Above anything else, there's this word called balance and self-care out there, which is very important. But we want to define what balance and self-care means for us so that we can truly reduce stress in this time. Being kind to yourself. When we look at the whole year of 2020, 2020 has been a very interesting year, not just with the pandemic, but with so many things that are going on individually as well as collectively. As a society, we kind of need a collective mindful moment as a country, as a society. The stress and tension, sometimes you can feel it in the air. And so we have to make those intentional decisions to really, really de stress, take a step back, talking to our healthcare or mental health professional to see what it is that we can do. Some of us, if we ask, like, what do you do for fun, or what do you do to relax? We're so busy going, we don't even know what we do for fun or know what we do to relax anymore. These things are so important. And relaxing doesn't just mean, taking a nap. They are the breathing exercises, setting time on your calendar to be healthy, to set goals and priorities. That time management skill is going to be so important to manage stress, because right now, there are so many people who are the parent, the teacher, the remote caregiver. There's so many functions and roles that we're having. It's going to be very important to really have some time management, to be able, and the holidays are coming. We are planning differently for the holidays. What does that look like, that you can celebrate the holidays and still be healthy and not totally stress out about it, that you can actually enjoy the holidays and it's not a stressful opportunity for you. So again, just want to remind everybody, stress is normal. Everybody definitely has stress. So that's the first thing. But also remember it, not all stress is bad. There's a certain level of stress, like Dr. Trinacosta said, with positive stress. But long-term stress can harm your health. We are not meant to function in that hypervigilant state on a constant basis. It affects our heart and it affects our mind. And being able to come back into that present moment, stress reduction as a strategy is so important. And in some communities, stress and trauma is so normalized that we think this is how we are supposed to function. This is not how we're supposed to function on a consistent basis. Knowing what it means to take care of you, and when you feel like you can't, or that stress isn't managed, reach out to get some assistance. I'm going to put some links in the chat. Just I see some links as well for the Wayne State Health Clinics, which is such a great opportunity. I work at the Children's Center, so we work with children who are 0 to 21 and provide services. There are crisis lines, which I'm also going to put in the chat. You can call the crisis line. There's a text crisis line where you can get immediate assistance. You do not have to figure this out and manage this alone. There is help that is available. And I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Blessman.